St. John Chrysostom is one of the most widely renowned writers in the history of the Church. Known as the chief of the Greek fathers, the first of all commentators, and the first of all orators, whether East or West, St. John Chrysostom's writings have been studied by Latin, Greek, and Syriac traditions for over 1.5 millennia. To quote the Catholic Encyclopedia, his grandeur of character makes him worthy of a place beside St. Basil and St. Athanasius. Born in Antioch in 347 AD, St. John Chrysostom was eventually elected as the Archbishop of Constantinople. He composed the Divine Liturgy of St. John Chrysostom, which has become the common usage of the Byzantine rite in both the Catholic and Eastern Orthodox communions. On account of this, he has been beloved as a Byzantine Greek father and is often understood by most in all communions of the Church as representing the Byzantine tradition. Nevertheless, I think that St. John Chrysostom is a Maronite father and can be studied by Maronite people with great edification. St. John Chrysostom, being born in Antioch, studied in the school of Antioch. He studied under the famous founder of the school of Antioch, Diodore of Tarsus. He was ordained a deacon by the famous Saint Meletius, and then a priest by the faction of Paulinus. He spent the formative years of his clerical life stuck between and eventually distancing himself from the internal schism between Saint Meletius and the faction of Paulinus that occurred in Antioch. He remained a monk priest of Antioch for many years, writing and preaching many great sermons. His sermons won him the name Chrysostom, which means golden tongue. His writings, the most prominent of which, were completed when he was a monk priest of Antioch. He refers to the various missions taken into the Antiochian Sea, whether down into the south towards the mountains of Lebanon or further into the east towards Persia. His homilies and theological treatises represent the pinnacle of the Antiochian school of theology. Most Maronites know that famously he corresponded with Saint Maroun, and that represents the only other textual evidence that we have historically of Saint Maroun's existence, in addition to his biography written by the Bishop of Cyrrhus, Theodoret. Nevertheless, as the Antiochian Syriac Church, we Maronites have had a heavy emphasis in our theological sources on the Syriac-speaking fathers, stemming heavily from the other prominent theological schools in Antioch of Edessa and Nisibis. But Antioch, unlike other sees, was peculiar in that there were two predominant languages. There was the language of the cities, and in the east of the Roman Empire, that was Greek. But then there was the language of the normal-speaking, rural Syrian Christians, which was Syriac. Now, at this time, Syria referred to the Roman province of Syria, which extends into the south of Turkey, where Antioch is, the modern city of Antakya, through modern-day Syria and modern-day Lebanon. And so the Phoenician people of Mount Lebanon and the port cities and the Syrian people, they all formed what were Syriac-speaking rural Christians. And we see even in the writings of Theodoret of Cyrus, some monasteries where Syriac and Greek-speaking Christians lived side by side and were governed, one monastery was governed with two separate superiors, one for the Greek-speaking and one for the Syriac-speaking. And this creates an interesting division in Antioch as we progress over the various schisms. See, in Antioch has occurred three lasting schisms, all of which have produced three patriarchal claimants. After Chalcedon, most of the Syriac-speaking Christians became monophysites. Most of the Greek-speaking city Christians accepted Chalcedon. There was a portion of Syriac Christians around the monastery of Bet Maroun that remained Chalcedonian. It was this group of Syriac-speaking Chalcedonian Christians that eventually divided themselves and separated from themselves at the beginning of the 8th century or towards the end of the 7th century from the Byzantines in Antioch itself. And this occurred through the election of John Maroun, St. John Maroun. And so what we see is that as Maronites, we stem from the Antiochian church that had a portion of its Syriac-speaking Christians remain Chalcedonian. Nevertheless, the entirety of the Antiochian tradition is claimed by all three divisions of the schism, that being whether the Jacobite, Melkite, or Maronite claimants. Our patriarchal synodal document makes reference for the need for Maronites to return to the broader Antiochian tradition as an ecumenical front in trying to strive for reunification with the Eastern Orthodox and the Oriental Orthodox. The point of this video is to say that it is illogical for us to not put forward John Chrysostom as one of our fathers. We are not limited to the Syriac-speaking Antiochians. John Chrysostom was an Antiochian Christian. He was the prominent writer, the most prominent writer of the Antiochian school. He knew our namesake, Saint Maroun, personally enough to write a letter to him even after he went to Constantinople as bishop. Antioch is closer to Cyrus, where Saint Maroun and his disciples, Jacob of Cyrus, Abraham of Cyrus, Baradatus, Limnius, Thethalius, Cura, Domina, they all were closer to Antioch than they were to Edessa of Nisibis. Now, this isn't to say that somehow we should read more of the Greek Antiochian fathers than we do of the Syriac Antiochian fathers. I think we should strive to do both so that we have a more holistic set of theological sources to perform systematic theology. It is necessary not to limit ourselves to a handful of fathers, but to embrace the entirety of our Antiochian tradition, to have an Antiochian expression theologically. And St. John Chrysostom's writings is an abundance of that. He is referred to as the first of all the commentators. The primary role of a theologian is to commentate on Scripture. To call him the first of all commentators among the fathers, and this is a Latin Rite text that is referring to him as such. This isn't Eastern boasting of our own. To refer to him as the first of all fathers is to hold him in one of the highest esteems possible for a theologian. We need to study, read, and incorporate his writings alongside the great and holy Syriac fathers of Ephraim and Jacob of Sarug, Isaac the Syrian. Don't deny that. I do not deny that. But John Chrysostom is a great source of Antiochian study for us, and we should embrace him as that type of source. In reading him, we will gain a different angle than what we get from the Syriac writers. The Syriac fathers, like St. Isaac, were heavy on spiritual, mystical, and ascetical theology. St. Ephraim and St. Jacob of Sarug engaged in a very unique form of poetic theology, focused heavily on typological considerations of Scripture and of expanding upon the mysteries of the faith in a way that the people could understand through hymns. But it is wrong for us to limit our theology to that. St. John Chrysostom, as part of the Antiochian school, engaged very much in the forefront of the development of the doctrines that were occurring during the 4th and 5th centuries, the ecumenical councils. Let's not forget that the Second Ecumenical Council of Constantinople I, was chaired by St. Meletius, the Patriarch of Antioch. The Third Ecumenical Council was heavily a tension between the Alexandrian and Antiochian schools, and so was the Fourth. And so we need to broaden our reading into the fullness of the Antiochian, Edessan, and Nicene schools of theology, and to start to form full pictures of all three as all wonderful wellsprings from which we Maronites can source our theology and our learning. It is not right for us to deny the place of systematic theology under a misunderstanding that the Syriacs did not do that. It is true, Ephraim preferred to engage in theology that edified the people. But many of our Antiochian fathers were great philosophers and theologians, including some of St. Maroun's own disciples, like Jacob of Cyrus and Benedict, both of whom consulted with the theological councils and with the theological council of Chalcedon at the request of Emperor Leo I. And so the intent of this video is to put forward John Chrysostom as a light of great sources of theology for us as Maronites, as a great source of joy and pride that the foremost Eastern Father came from our theological school.